Cal Poly Pomona students and alum, and welcome to our event this evening. So what I've asked, actually, I guess I should give you my name. My name is Sherry Peters. I'm one of the career counselors and liaison to the College of Business. And so tonight I've asked 3 alumni to be on a panel to answer multiple questions in regards to job search and what do I do now that I've graduated, or students who are preparing for the world of work. So I'm going to go ahead and start and ask each one of the panelists to just give us a 2-minute introduction about themselves, and then also to talk about one fond memory or one fun fact about Cal Poly Pomona when they were students. So why don't we go ahead and begin, and we'll start with Freddie, since I see you on the screen first.
My name is Freddie Rivera. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. I'm a MHR grad, class of 2010. And I've been working for about 10 years about. My fondest memory at Cal Poly would be, I think, graduating. I was just so happy, entering the workforce and everything. But I would say that's my fondest memory, being the first in my family to go to college and do all that. So thank you, and looking forward to all the questions.
Great, thank you, Freddie. And Monique?
Hi, my name is Monique Aribay. I got my master's in urban and regional planning in 2017. I'm currently working for the city of Lancaster, and I have been in the public sector for a long time. I started in LUSD actually as a teacher's assistant, and then decided I wanted to get into planning, so I got my master's degree, and I've been happy ever since. I can remember a lot of things from Cal Poly, but I think one of my favorite things to do was, because since we had evening classes, my cohort and I would hang out before class, and we'd have full-on meals all the time. And we had class from 5 to 11 at night sometimes. So it was just fun to hang out with them because everything on campus was closed at that time. So we kind of made our own fun, and then we went to class. And that was, I miss that. Thank you.
Great. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And Mauro?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Mauro Ibarra. I graduated from Cal Poly Pomona with my master's in electrical engineering in 2013. Currently working for Accenture Consulting, large global technology consulting company. And one of my fondest memories, just like Freddie, was graduation. I was working full-time at Southern California Edison at the time when I was attending Cal Poly Pomona. And I can tell you that working full-time and going to school full-time was not fun for me. So being able to walk, being able to graduate, take those pictures, and then just get back to work was kind of the fond memory that I can recall. So I'm happy to be here with you all, and hopefully I can share some tips and tricks on the topic today.
Great, wonderful. Thank you all so much for sharing. So I think we're going to just jump right on in and start asking questions. So I've let the panelists know that not everyone needs to answer every single question, but whoever jumps in, maybe all 3 will answer question 1 or question 3, but we'll just kind of move it along. We'll see how it goes. If you have a specific question and we don't ask it, you can certainly send that in the chat for those of you who are attending the event, and we'll do our best to answer the question before the end of the session tonight. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So for any of the panelists, what are your most favorable traits in a candidate who's applying to your company?
Do you guys want me to, I can go first. So some of the most favorable traits that we look for at Accenture is effective communication, and maybe storytelling, kind of one and the same. But a lot of the work that we do at Accenture is working with clients, helping them solve some of their most challenging business problems. So being able to think critically, as well as being able to deconstruct a major problem, right? Elicit input, feedback, requirements from our clients' problems, and kind of formulating an opinion, then coming back to our client, telling a story and saying, hey, here's where you are today. Here's where you want to be. Did I get this right? And is this the journey that you want to go on. And so ability to communicate and storytell, I think is a big thing today. Not just at Accenture, I see that happening at other companies. I feel like today we're graduating a lot of top talent with, big technical skills. So to stand out, I feel like effective communication and storytelling really are some of the key things that Accenture looks for these days. And those are obviously a lot more difficult when you're in a virtual setting. So your ability to communicate and captivate your audience via, Zoom call or Skype call or, Teams call, I feel like is critical today. So that's kind of one of the things that really stands out for Accenture when we do screen interviews, and that kind of sets you up for follow-up interviews.
I guess I'll add, at Oracle, we have a phrase that's called teach, coach, train. So just kind of piggyback off of Maudo's point, being somebody that's like open to feedback, somebody that is coachable, good listening skills. Sometimes you'd be interacting with clients, teammates, or having a discussion about how to improve a process, workflow, or potentially like a product and a product feature set. So I think collaboration, teamwork, listening, and I would also say too, don't underestimate the skill of asking questions and asking the right questions, because sometimes you're trying to uncover what the issue is, and asking the right questions is something that leads you to that a lot quicker. And I would just say, like I said, communication is something that's really big, and collaboration too, for sure.
All right. So I'll piggyback off both of you. So we look for people that are able to communicate well, of course, and also those who have good problem solving skills. We deal with the public on a daily basis. We present to and during public hearings, so they need to be able to storytell as well. So I think during the interview, we want to know for sure that they're interested in the field, actually, because a lot of people aren't interested in city planning, but like make sure that they're interested. This is what they want to do. They're motivated, as well as they're able to speak correctly. Yeah.
I think you're on mute, Sherry.
Yeah.
I was trying to be so quiet. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that. What is your advice for students who want to work at companies that don't actively recruit on our campus? So some of the large organizations, such as Disney and companies like that, don't typically come to the campus because they have so many individuals who are submitting resumes. So how would you tell a student, what are those key ways that they could get their foot in the door or get in contact with those large companies, if you have any advice for them?
I'll probably touch on this only because at Accenture, Accenture has specific schools that we recruit from. And so part of my job has been, and Sherry, this, I've engaged with you and a few others at Cal Poly, right? My job is to try to help increase diversity recruiting at Accenture. And so that means that I'm creating relationships at the schools that I attended. UC Riverside, Cal Poly Pomona, and Cal State Long Beach is also another school that we're helping. My advice to students from schools like that, even before Accenture started to recruit, was to identify alumni that work in those companies, right? And at Accenture, coming out of UC Riverside as an undergrad, Accenture would have never recruited me from Riverside, just because they don't recruit from there. So it does turn out that there are quite a few UC Riverside and Cal Poly alumni students at these companies. So go on LinkedIn, find someone that works at a company that you're interested in, and be intentional. Don't waste your time, and don't waste people's time. If you're going to reach out to someone, say, hey, I noticed you're in the artificial intelligence practice, and I'd love to share with you a couple of thoughts on my point of view about how you can use machine learning to improve or increase your membership as you start to roll out Disney Plus or something like that, right? Make sure you stand out, and make sure you create a connection so that the person that you're actually messaging feels like there's something in return, right? They're going to engage in a conversation, and they're going to want to know what you know. And I think that'll create that kind of connection. And, you know, the power of a network is it's enormous. So if you reach out to me and you express an opinion and I feel like I have something to say about it, I'm just going to engage right back. And that might lead to an opportunity to engage and maybe a referral. So for those companies that don't actively recruit from your campus, find a way to create a connection with an alumni. And if there isn't an alumni that you've identified, reach out to executives, the CEO, the CIO, reach out to someone and say, hey, I noticed, you know, you're a big supporter of, you know, the environment. Here's my point of view on that. And then just create that connection. I feel like a lot of the times I get a lot of messages on LinkedIn, and I know students mean well, but it's an introduction, and I'd like to see a little bit more, just so that could help me figure out if there is a good fit, or if there was an opening, how and where could I refer this individual. So just try to shorten the engagement process if you're going to reach out to someone via LinkedIn, but try to do that. Find your network, and if not, find someone that you share a common interest with, and try to establish a connection that is going to, you know, be fruitful. That would be my advice.
Right.
I think I would just add, you know, LinkedIn for sure. Look for any alumni, reach out to them, and to Mato's point, make sure you have like a very solid note. You know, I was reached out to recently, and she didn't have anything to say. It was a little bit awkward, and I think the phone call lasted like 4 minutes, just because I think she was kind of like, oh, I really don't have anything to say. And I was trying to converse with her, but to add on top of that, you know, your professors have been, you know, teaching for quite a long time, and they might have known somebody who works at X company or X company. So that might be another in. That's certainly something that I kind of took advantage of with my professors when I wasn't taking classes in the evening. And I was taking classes like maybe right after U hour or something, and I would like hop in and talk to them. I would say, you know, leverage these kind of events too. That's definitely something where you can make a connection. Another thing you can think about right now is diversity and inclusion is certainly something that always was important, but I think now is getting a lot more traction and attention. So there's a lot of webinars hosted by some of the companies that, you know, you might not be coming on campus or recruiting from Cal Poly, and that's okay, because you can reach out and you can kind of attend those events, whether it's diversity focused or that company's hosting some sort of virtual webinar on a certain topic, if not hiring itself. I was just told by that we're using Jumpstart, or Cal Poly's using Jumpstart, which is kind of a really, really just awesome platform for finding alumni. So you can definitely do that as well. And I would just say, you know, from a LinkedIn perspective, another thing you can do is if you find a company, and again, you really have to like look at the requirements and see if it's kind of a fit and if you have the experience. You know, reach out to recruiters. You know, that's their job. Their job is to bring in talent, and their job is at times to bring in diverse talent. So if you feel that any one of those two things kind of fits what you're trying to do, that's definitely something that you can kind of do as well. But again, it goes back to the point, you know, you have to put together a really good solid note, not too long, not too short. Attach your resume, and again, that's another thing that needs to be done is the resume. But yeah, those are just some of the tips that I would kind of, you know, share with you guys right now for sure.
Okay. So cities don't actively recruit. So I'll just give you what I did in the past. When I was attending Cal Poly, I was working as a TA full time, and I had space in between classes. So what I ended up doing was emailing the city of Pomona, and I constantly, not harassed, but I constantly kept in contact with HR. And I said, hey, like, is there any internship positions open? Because the planning requires you to have experience. Like, they want you to be experienced, even entry level, right? So I was like, darn, like, how am I going to do this when I'm already working full time and I'm going to class for 5 hours? And luckily, I was able to get an interview with like community services, and they worked with me. And of course, it wasn't a paid internship because, let's be real, like, you have to start from the bottom if you want to make your way up. So I ended up interning, and what they had me do was, luckily, they were flexible and had me work on the weekends. So I was not only doing grad school, I was working full time, and I was going to all 28 parks in Pomona to count the number of like benches, trash cans, whatever I needed to do, because I knew that this was necessary for me to succeed in the planning world. So I would just say, find a city that is local if you need it to be local, and if you want to go to a city, and ask if there are any positions available, if they need any help. I know it's kind of hard right now because we're kind of limiting the number of people that are helping and remote access and stuff like that. But it doesn't hurt to reach out to like a manager or director in a city and say like, hey, if you guys need help, I'm available. I'm a student. And if you're a student, it's a major plus. So.
Great. Be proactive, right?
Yes.
Okay. So in a world of digital resume submittals, online applications, is there any way to make your resume stand out in a positive way to get the interview?
I think, just to kind of piggyback off of the last point, experience always kind of like, floats to the top, right? But in cases where you don't have experience, or maybe you're looking for experience, right? I would say community involvement, participation on campus. Similar to myself, I was working 3 jobs. I was showing up to campus for like 10 hours straight of classes. And I also worked at the swap meet with my mother, Friday, like Saturday, Sunday, sometimes Friday night. That was my favorite. As you guys can tell, I'm so excited about that. But I would just say the very like simple things, like no typos, written very well. I'm not a fan of an adjective. Like if you put, I am looking for an entry-level position at your like, great. What else? What do you bring to the table? Maybe like a summary of qualifications or something like this. But if you've done any kind of projects, I would say, was it successful? Did you, meet the goal, beat the goal? There's so many different websites nowadays that are so cheap. And if you have the time, interest, or, I think it's like $30 a month or something like that, putting some of your work or portfolio, schoolwork, maybe, unpaid internships is something that you can definitely put on there as well. And something that Mauro touched upon that I would really, really, again, include in your website, if that's something that you want to do, or portfolio, is stuff that you're interested in. Because stuff that you're interested in is going to be, passionate. You're going to go that extra mile and really go ahead and do it. But I would say if you don't have experience, those are some of the things that you can kind of do. Being a part of like nationally recognized organizations, whether it's like a fraternity, sorority, or, NSVShips, I know there's urban planning organizations as well, et cetera, et cetera. So some of those are some of the things that the resume will get you the interview. But once you're in the interview, for example, if I was talking to Mauro and we had never met, but we had both worked at Edison, that's something that we can kind of, talk about, and he'll remember me. So, joining these organizations, doing this community involvement exposes you to like different networks of people. I've actually gotten a job, or I transferred internally at a company because I would volunteer. I met the leader of the organization. He asked me what I did, and I just told him. And then next thing you know, I have an email saying, hey, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more. We're doing such and such. So you never know like what opportunities are going to arise just because you're participating in your community, things like this. So I'll end there, and I know the panel has some more stuff to add for sure. Or not.
me or you. I mean, I can add.
You're very good.
I can add to that. I think so. I mean, Freddie's probably the most qualified here, based on his background, right? I feel like Freddie touched upon the things that I think stand out to me when I look at resumes. I also attend a lot of recruiting events where I'm, constantly reviewing resumes for Accenture. And some of the things that stand out to me, on top of the leadership, like Freddie mentioned, right? If you don't have any work experience, but you do want to shine, show your contributions to, chapters like he mentioned, right? There's Alpha, there's SHIP, there's Mesa. I mean, there's so much that you could be doing and taking on a leadership position. I know, just like Freddie, right? From personal experience, some of us just didn't have the luxury getting an internship, because we're probably working 5 different jobs trying to pay for our books and schooling, right? And that was me. As an undergrad, I probably worked 80 to 100 hours just to pay for schooling. On top of that, my books, everything else, right? So some of us just aren't going to have a lot of that experience in our resume, but if you can show potential, somehow convey potential based on all the other things that you're doing, I think that goes a long way. And don't be afraid to put on your resume that, you work this many hours. I think it's important to show that, that you're working that hard just to keep, stay on track and keep going to school. Because the ultimate goal here is to get a degree that's going to open doors for you once you graduate. That would be one thing. Another thing, just to, like, tactically speaking, I would say that today, you guys are probably very comfortable with social media. I can go on YouTube and find a very impressive page of someone who's doing a bunch of great things, right? And YouTube is a free platform for you to be able to stand up a page and showcase all of your great projects and the work that you're doing on campus, and a way to get, your professor to provide feedback, input, reviews, etc. So we are in that digital age. So you need to start using some of those digital tools to showcase your resume and your experiences in a different fashion. You have LinkedIn, you can provide a point of view on LinkedIn, but on top of that, you have other mediums, right? And so I have yet to see a student that has put all of their projects on YouTube and talked about them. Like, let me talk to you about my senior design project. My role was this, I did that, the outcome was this. And that to me shows potential. And so I have yet to see something like that, but I feel like that's where we're headed, right? Everybody is going to be a data scientist or some, artificial intelligence major. You're going to know how to write algorithms that probably can do the work that you're going to do anyways for a company like AWS or Microsoft. So what else do you bring to the table? And you got to showcase that personality and your ability to communicate and lead. So I feel like those are some of the things that stand out, and that would also help you stand out even further. But to actually land, to be at the top of the list, you got to show potential, you got to have some experience. And if you don't, build a connection, and a referral usually trumps everyone, right? Like, if you can get a referral, that referral is going to land you at the top of the stack. Now it's your responsibility to actually wow the interviewer and land the interview. So referrals to me are golden. And if you're good at networking, you're going to be able to get your resume at the top of the stack. I see that happen quite a bit.
I would just add to that a tip. When you're looking at different jobs, look at the job description and look at what exactly they're looking for. So if you don't have experience, like, for me, like in a city, but I had customer service experience dealing with parents and, organizational skills like that, that helps out a lot. Because I know a lot of us, like he said, we're not lucky enough to have experience in the field that we ended up in. But I think a major thing is to look at the job description, because when you're looking at different resumes, you're like, oh, this person has experience doing that. They can probably deal with the public and they can answer phones and emails and stuff like that. So I think that is super helpful when you're looking for jobs.
Can I just add one really quick thing as well?
Sure.
One thing that I'll add is, obviously we've talked about LinkedIn at length already. One thing that I did when I was in school was, kind of get a sense of the companies that I was wanting to work for, if I was to be so lucky, right? But as you start looking at these various profiles, you can get a good sense of, what degrees, what certifications, what organizations people are a part of. To give you guys an example, at Edison, if I saw a student with like an EIT, which is an engineering training, that was an IEEE, PES, these are organizations that are from in the electrical field, right? Or electrical utility field. And, the list goes on and on. So when I saw those people, in my mind, I was like, well, this is like, they were like pre-made for Edison, or they're gearing themselves up to join Edison. And it just made my job easier. And it made their job easier because they had already prepped for it. So if you're trying to work as an Imagineer at Disney or something like this, what degrees, what certifications, etc. And same thing for urban planning, consulting, for Oracle, it's the same thing. You can kind of look at, what they've done to get into that role, and then you can kind of reverse engineer and research. And whether it's a certification, an organization, they go to certain meetups or something, Meetups, I think, is something that would be really good to kind of check out as well. It's a free app. It's a lot of people getting together for like an interest. A lot of times there's like career aspects to it and networking. So just throwing it out there as something, but reverse engineering what people, had to do to get in the job is something that I tried to do, and I would recommend to you guys as well as something being very helpful. But you have to know like kind of where you want to go or what kind of roles you're looking for.
I just wanted to mention real briefly that on the campus you can use Portfolium to add your projects and add really unique academic work that you're trying to complete, and you can make that public. You can send the link to certain individuals. So that is something that the campus does provide to students. So again, just another option for you to utilize. And there are a lot of students in College of Business that have utilized that and put really unique entrepreneurial projects and so forth on Portfolium. So students, if you haven't utilized that, maybe take a quick look. And you log in just using your Bronco login information. Okay, so piggybacking on the resume. So we're great, we submit a fantastic resume. So what does a student need to do to land the interview if there are individuals who have 10 years experience and they're applying to the same job?
I guess I can go. I'll just
Freddie, this is all you.
I'll just kick it off. Thank you, Mauro. So I've heard this before. I've heard this before when I was a student. I still hear it to this day, and I still have conversations about this. So just because somebody has 10 years of experience, and let's for the sake of example, let's just say it's an entry-level position. It's not a guarantee that that person's going to be, ahead of you. Number one, because they might be looking for an entry-level position on purpose, which is they want to build up their bench for future talent to grow and nurture them and develop them, right? So I wouldn't, that's out of your control, and it's not something that you can have any effect on. I would just say, harken back to what we talked about, the resume itself. And again, just speaking from personal experience, of course, I was doing all my jobs and working, driving around, and, my car broke down a couple times, and, trying to see how am I going to pay for this book, and I'll trade you this book if you trade me this book, that kind of thing with peers. But I would really, really get good at interviewing, and I would get really, really good at networking, because those go hand in hand. And I'm a very shy person. Like, I'll be very frank. I used to be really bad in high school. It got better and better as Cal Poly went, and then being a professional. But those two things, if you can kind of be more of a conversational interview, and kind of have a rapport and be engaged and, kind of listen with intent and then, give your answer, that's going to make you stand out quite a bit. The resume is what's get you the interview, and then obviously being a really, really good interviewer, which is, STAR method, behavioral interviewing. I certainly was in the Career Center, bugging everybody and their mom of review my resume or this, that, or the other, and just like really hustling and being able to do that. And I would just add on top of that, because I don't want to take up the whole time. Again, I know we keep on talking about this, but if you know that Andrea, Sherry, and Mauro are going to be on my interview panel, then looking them up on LinkedIn to see where they worked, where they went to school, was one of them on LBSA like me, or etc. These things, because you want to establish an affinity or kind of connection, because like, okay, you were the membership chair for LBSA, you also increased membership by such and such. You had to communicate, collaborate, do the strategy. Like, wow, as an entry-level person, an interviewer, I would be like, wow, this is really cool. And I know what that job entails because, my experience and whatever. So I would say some of those things are definitely things that you can definitely try, but getting really, really solid at interviewing is something that will not only help you get that entry-level job, but will just help you a ton in your career moving forward.
All right. So I've interviewed a lot. And a lot of the times we're not fortunate enough to know who's on the panel. Usually the first time it'll be like people within the city organization. And the second round, the first round will show how much you know about the profession, right? And the second round will be if you're a good fit or not. And what I used to do was ask planners that were already in the field if they remembered any questions that came up during interviews and stuff like that. So over the course of a couple months, because I was saying yes to every interview, I think you should say yes to every interview because it helps with your practice skills. I was compiling a list of questions that would come up every time I interviewed. So that way I was able to have an answer ready, and then I was able to connect an experience to that answer. And I feel like the more you get used to interviewing, the less nervous you get. I mean, you're going to be nervous regardless, but you'll be less nervous. You'll be making eye contact with people. And unfortunately, sometimes interview panels won't connect with you and they won't make eye contact with you, but I wouldn't lose your cool, and I would just continue doing what you need to do and just try your best.
I think I'll add one thing, since these are all great tips, but in like the context of someone's got 10 years of experience over me, how do I, kind of beat this person in this race, right, to interview and land the job? I think that if you're able to create that connection and you're able to establish trust with your interviewer, then 10 years goes out the window very quickly, because the other guy could have, answered a question, very poorly. And so I think it's the ability to tell the story, the ability to create trust, and the ability to like Freddie mentioned, right? Your STAR method. Sometimes it's just SAR, right? Situation, action, result. And so for me, if you can prove to me that you understand the big picture, like if I ask you a question that probably requires you to have 10 years of experience, but you don't, if you can prove to me that you're a good listener, and if you ask questions if you didn't understand the question, but show that you have the ability to take in big concepts and then break them down and say, did I understand you correctly? Is this what you're looking for? And then take a pause, take a deep breath. I interview students that like are just too fast. They want to tell me everything, and they kind of trip on themselves. So as you slow down, as you take deep breaths, you'll kind of slow the ambiance in the call or in the room, and it'll give you a different level of confidence. And confidence goes a long way. It allows you to kind of filter out all the noise and just focus on the the story that you're trying to tell. And if you can prove to me that you can go from A to B to C just as well as this person with 10 years of experience, but I see potential and I see the growth and trajectory, most likely I'm going to lean towards you versus someone that's got 10 years that probably is looking to go from point, A to Z very quickly, right? And normally as an interviewer, you'll see that like people want to come in over qualified and then already want to become the CEO. And so you have to have that in mind, right? Don't go in there saying, when they ask you, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Don't tell them that you're going to replace the CEO, because you're really not going to replace the CEO, right? But the guy or the gal that's got 10 years of experience on you probably feels like they can, because they've done this for the past 10 years. So just think about it in those terms. Don't ever be intimidated by who's going to be in the room or what your competition is. Just, own the situation, own your stories, be confident, and create that connection. And once you establish trust, it's really hard to lose that. So focus on yourself. Don't focus on the competition, which is hard, but that's kind of what I would recommend here.
Great, all fantastic answers. Thank you so much. So the next question that we have, what questions do you prefer to be asked by an interviewee that shows they're interested in the position and someone you'd like to hire?
I can share a couple examples, or again, I'm from the consulting side, so like I'm not a professional HR. I'm not an HR professional. Freddie probably more.
You're doing great, man. You're doing great. Come on.
But my advice is like, if I'm interviewing someone, and we've gotten to the end of the interview, or we're at a point where it makes sense to ask a question, ask me questions about the job itself. Like, for example, if I'm interviewing you for data science, data analytics, you know, machine learning, AI, and you know that Accenture provides professional services to, you know, the majority of Fortune 100 and 500 clients, right? Ask me a question about how are you helping Disney do this, or how you're helping, you know, the industry kind of crack this code, or like Accenture makes in, you know, a lot of our project information public. So there was this project where we were trying to crack down on, forget the example here, but we were trying to crack down on a very suspicious behavior that was happening within a specific region, and we were using machine learning, AI, to identify patterns in like cellular activity, to be able to like identify areas, you know, using heat maps and analytics to hone in on areas where there's heavy activity, where we knew there was a problem that we were trying to solve. And so one of the students actually asked the question about that project. They said, hey, I heard you guys helped, you know, crack down this case that was impacting the city of Miami. I'd like to learn more about that, because, you know, we have a similar project that we did at my senior design project. And, you know, from an aspect of machine learning, and then the conversation just went on and on and on. We end up running out of time for the interview, but everyone that was interviewing this one person didn't care. They were just so impressed about their ability to take a real life situation, a real project, compare it to the work that they've done, and then like engage in this back and forth as if he or she was part of the project. So find the right time to ask a question, but then bring your experience along with it, and then have a point of view. And I feel like if you can drag people into a conversation, that to me is gold. Like, I don't want to ask you about, you know, tell me about a time where you did this, or tell me about a time, because everybody has had a time, and I'm sure you'll figure out how to get out of it and how to solve the issue. But to be intellectually curious, I feel like that's where like Freddie talks about being timid. I myself was an extremely shy person when I was growing up. So to be intellectually curious means that you're confident. It's okay that you're going to ask a question. There's no dumb questions in an interview unless you really think it's a dumb question. But that would be my advice. Find the right time to ask it, and then find a way to relate to it, and dig deeper if you can intellectually do that. So that would be one of my advice.
Monique, do you want to go, or?
Yeah, I can go.
Okay.
So I don't like to hear like salary questions during after interviews. You know, like how much am I going to make?
How much vacation do I get?
I know, right? Is this going to pay off my student loans? So I feel like some of the best questions I've heard are like, what will what kind of responsibilities will be happening? Like, what kind of responsibilities would I have if I got this position? What would a normal day look like? Who am I going to interact with daily? Questions like that. And I feel like the boys had said earlier, or the men, whatever, they had said earlier about doing research about the company or, you know, employer that you're looking into. I think that's major, because for cities, they love to hear about stuff that's happening in the city. So in Lancaster, we had a major downtown revitalization, right? So during the interview, I was asking them about it, because my future bosses were the ones that like were in charge of that. So I think that showed them that I was interested. I took the time. It wasn't just like a normal kind of job interview. I actually took the time to research the city, find out exactly what I was going to be doing. That's a lot of the questions I asked. I said, is there room for growth? Am I going to be able to learn more about like environmental laws, stuff like that, which normally a lot of planners don't do in the public sector on their own, writing that kind of reports and stuff like that. And I think that goes a long way, just like taking that extra step and learning more about your possible employer and asking those questions at the end to show that you really want to be here, and that makes you stand out.
Yep.
Great. So this is a very unique question that someone asked, and I thought it'd be worth sharing. How does one explain a 3-year empowerment gap that was out of your control?
Did you say empowerment gap?
Uh-huh. So perhaps maybe a work gap.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I think, you know, I can kick it off. Sorry guys to just kind of I think this is something that it depends what it is, and I think it depends how you communicate it, and it's all in how you communicate it and talk about it. I've been lucky not to have a gap. I have friends and colleagues that, you know, have, but depending on what it is, if you're gonna say something like, you know, I didn't want to work anymore and I wanted to just travel the world and, you know, fill in the blank, that's not, you know, I'm gonna be like, well, what is to stop you from doing that if I were to hire you, right? That's gonna cross my mind, which is not something that I want to think about. But I think if it's something very personal, you know, related to family, and it's something that's kind of private, I would just give like a sentence or two, give it a high level overview, and just explain it that way. Like I have a colleague and friend that we had this very conversation, and I think she said, we came up with like, I had to leave ex-employer to move back to home, which is Los Angeles, due to a family emergency. Everything's okay now. But that was my 3-year absence. In my or whatever it was, right? In my absence, my 3-year absence, I took the time to, you know, do research or get a certificate, you know, again, fill in the gap with whatever you can. However, it shouldn't be something that is held against you. If you do have the requisite like skills, knowledge, skill, abilities, right? Some employers, some people might say something or hold it against you. And to be very candid, if that's the case, you probably don't want to work there, or maybe, you know, that's something that you don't want to deal with, but life happens. And if life were to happen to you as an employee, you know, I think that courtesy should be extended. So the same should be said for people interviewing for said company, right? So just come up with something that's very quick, concise, tells the story, but doesn't give away too many details, because that's your business, that's your family's business, or whatever it might be, right? But just, you know, again, don't put it in a way that's like, were they partying this whole time? Or, you know, I literally had someone come to an interview. It was a referral from an executive, and she ended up telling me how her break was due to starting a lingerie company and like going to EDM festivals and starting a blog about it. And I just was like, great, you know, I hope the company did well. And I just was kind of like, all right, next question, because you know, this is, I didn't think that's what I was going to get. So I'll stop there, but yeah.
I think I'm going to answer this one a little bit different than Freddie, which I think is just based on the type of work that I do, right? But at Accenture, I find myself on a plane Mondays and I fly back home on Thursdays. I find myself in, you know, Seattle. I've worked in Milwaukee, Chicago, places I probably don't want to be in right now, given all the unrest and everything that's happening. But when Accenture is looking for individuals, we want to make sure that you're well-rounded and that you have that personality to be able to engage with, you know, people that have different personalities, right? And the term that comes to mind right now is worldly. Like if you told me you left to go start a lingerie company and you did EDM and all this stuff, I would be impressed, because that to me shows initiative, entrepreneurship, all that stuff. But if I looked at your track record and it showed that you were jumping from company to company every year, that to me would be the red flag. But if it showed to me that you had 3 to 5 years commitment, and then you were just burnt out and you felt like you could take a 2 to 3 year break to do something, that to me would be impressive. So I think it just has to do with how it aligns with your resume, and make sure that the story that you tell is the right one to tell, given, you know, your career progression. And if you have a break from, you know, straight out of college, you have a 3-year break, you don't have any experience, I feel like that's going to be the most challenging one, but also probably the one that's going to work against you the least. Because if it was a personal reason, you can talk about it. And, you know, if you're going to come back and apply after 3 years, you're probably going to be looking for an entry level job anyways. So just be honest, and just have a good story to tell. Keep it personal. As much as we want to know about you, a lot of the personal stuff, it's best if you just keep it to yourself. So put together a good story that really, you know, illustrates you were going through a difficult time and this was the right decision to make, but I'm back and I'm ready and I have potential, and here's why you should hire me. So I think there's just different situations and approaches based on where that gap is within your career. But I kind of look at it a little bit differently just because of the entrepreneurial spirit. But if I were at a company that's a little bit more conservative, I probably would question that gap, right? As Freddie mentioned, would you do that to, if I hired you? I feel like that's a very valid reason and question. So
for the record, there's more to that story, but it's like, so I'll just leave it there. But there's more to the story, so I'll just leave it there.
I love it. I love it.
All right. So, is there this is a very interesting question. Is there such thing as a bulletproof career? If so, how do you create it?
Wow.
I don't even know what that means.
No. Like, I'm gonna assume that the question is after 10 years of being a professor, am I ever gonna get fired? I don't think that there is a bulletproof career. If the question is related to will I ever get fired from my job, I think that companies change, leadership changes very quickly, and I think that someone that if you have the potential to make a difference, you probably don't want to be at a company your entire career. And if you do, good for you, but make sure that you're focused on giving back to the community, giving back to your members, giving back to the schools that you went to. And so if you start to do that, it's also going to help you build networks and understand that there's probably more out there. And so if you're content and you're comfortable, good for you. But at the moment where I start feeling like I'm getting bored and I'm not learning, I'm going to probably go look for the next best thing, right? Because I feel like I still have energy to give. And so that puts my career at risk. I could make a transition and I could land a job where my personality just doesn't mesh with someone else's personality. And so today I'm a senior manager, aspiring to be a managing director, right? So with that comes a lot of risk. If I want to stay in consulting, I got to close a bunch of multi-million-dollar projects, which also means I have to be on the road and away from my family. So consulting is probably the least, right, bulletproof career, but it is a very rewarding one. And at the moment where you need to, if you feel like you want to go back into the industry for a more secure job, you can do that. But I don't think that there is such a thing as a bulletproof career. I don't know. I could be wrong.
I mean, I would agree. I mean, I've worked at places or with people that said, job safety, recession proof, etc. I don't agree with that. And then on top of that, you have things like technology and innovation. I mean, if you flash back to, for example, the 90s, GTE was big, AT&T, or, whatever phone company, Pac Bell, I think was around back then.
Pac Bell.
And then you have the invention of the cell phone and just completely revolutionized the industry. So all those people that were, 20, 30, 40, 5, 10 year, employees, now there's like, okay, well, your skill set is no longer needed, etc. So, whether it's technology, laws passed, or just difference in consumer tastes, or, different things that are available, things are going to continue to evolve. And to Mauro's point, I would agree 100%. Just because you graduate from school doesn't mean that you stop being a student. You should be kind of a lifelong student and, pursuing different things to learn, whether on, like my mom likes to call it, the YouTube, and just always learning from there. And because the reason I say that is because you're always going to be learning, getting improvement, and then becoming a better professional. And thus that'll lead you to, getting your first promotion and getting your first people management position, if that's something that you want to pursue. So I think there are certain exceptions, but I'm not sure that's what we're talking about. And I think what I'm talking about is like, something grim, like, the people that do like funerals or something like this, that's not what we're kind of talking about. Right. So, but yeah, I really wouldn't think that there's such a thing as a rock solid career for sure, or bulletproof career.
It was a good question, whichever student or alum asked it. Thank you so much for answering that. So what do you find to be the most difficult aspects of working in your industry?
I think it's, for me at least, it's a very political thing. And you have to, your bosses are basically the ones in charge and you have to make them happy, but you're also working for the public interest. So especially right now, everyone's at home and there's a lot of people with time on their hands. So you have to kind of find this balance between, okay, I need to follow the rules that I need to, like the zoning code, right? But I also need to help these residents. And I feel like that if you are not patient and you don't know how to be a problem solver, it's going to be very difficult for you to succeed in like the public sector. And I feel like if you don't have that, you're probably not going to do very well. You just have to be very patient. You need to know your stuff. And at times you have to be firm, but not mean or rude. Yeah. That's the most difficult thing for me. Is finding a balance.
Yeah.
I think the most difficult piece for me is finding that balance. Accenture will take all the time that you'll give it, right? So if I want to, if I keep answering emails, if I keep logging on and just doing work, Accenture will take that from you, right? Like they're just going to continue to take that time from you. So I find the most difficult piece is being able to disconnect and draw a fine line between, what's the right thing to do for you and for your family, both mentally and physically. And then, at what point do you really have to double down? You're probably about to close a major project. And I find myself doing this a lot. When it's, closing time, we'll probably work, for 2 weeks straight nonstop. And we have teams offshore all over the world. And I'm up at 4 talking to India. I'm up at, midnight talking to someone else. And it's just really challenging. And you just have to find the time to be able to say, hey guys, I gave you 2 weeks of hard delivery to close this deal. I need to disconnect and don't expect me to turn on my phone for a week or so. So it's being able to find the courage to draw a boundary, because sometimes you hold yourself accountable. And I find that, I don't know about you guys, but me as a Latino, I find that I have to do the right thing all the time. And sometimes I feel like the right thing to do is to work, is to like give every minute to my company. And sometimes that'll impact your family. So you have to think about what is that balance, and then you have to create some boundaries and really respect them. For me, sometimes it's difficult to do that, just given the nature of the work. So that's probably what I find the most challenging today. But even just in consulting, I find that that's just the nature of the work sometimes.
I see a question that is probably directed towards me.
So let me say it so all the students can hear. So has there been a time where your boss's interests and the public interests were on two different sides, and how did you solve that issue? Sounds like an interview question.
Yeah, I know. So this happens quite a lot. As I said, it's very political. And at times, I unfortunately have to follow what I'm told. I, of course, make my argument and say, like, this is why I disagree with you. But at the end of the day, if my bosses and council feel like this is the best thing for the city, I have to follow it.
Can be challenging. Thank you so much.
Yeah, very challenging. Pose ethical issues. At times yes, it does pose ethical issues sometimes.
Thank you for asking those, Lorenzo. So let me move on. This is a really unique question. What was the hardest job you've ever had, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Oh man.
I would say, honestly, being a student, in my opinion, being a college student, because I think, as we have all kind of alluded to and mentioned, I'm Latino as well. And number one, not having that support system that went through it ahead of time. I get C versus Cal State. I don't know what I'm doing. And at times I would be in my car and I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? I'm paying and I'm going here and, this whole thing. But it's so many hours and it's so much dedication over such a long period of time that, I feel that was probably the most difficult. And I, just to like give a serious answer, I would say the job that I have now is I'm doing like global strategy, and it's something where, you know, I have to kind of similar to Mauro, I have to talk to, you know, my counterparts in Asia, Europe, Africa, LATAM, et cetera, but also lead them, and then deal with imposter syndrome, being like, these people are listening to me and looking to me for guidance. However, you know, I know what I'm doing, I think, you know, so I would say that, because I have to operate and influence people that don't directly report to me, and have leaders do things that I want them to do, but in a way that is their idea, not my idea, right? So not just saying you need to do this, but here's why, here's the benefits. So I would say that that's like a different skill set. I've done it before, but I think at the scale I'm doing it now, it's very, very challenging for sure.
I don't know if he's gonna talk.
Go ahead. I just
Oh,
smiled.
I think you have a question though.
So, oh, there were a couple of questions. Let me take a look real quick here. So one question, what would you recommend is the best way to transition from a layoff to getting a job?
I think it's an interesting question, right? Because I think the next thing to do after you get laid off is to start job hunting. There's no real transition unless you know that you're gonna get laid off and you've been given either a 2-week notice or a 1-month notice or what have you. And if you can't afford to take that break, then I think the transition it has to revolve around networking and reaching out to everyone that you know, right? To try to create that safety net that you're gonna land on your feet. But if you haven't established any of that, then probably, you know, you need to be working toward building a strong network that's going to support you along the way, and you have to have a strong brand. If you get laid off and you don't have a good brand, that's probably why you got laid off, right? Unless the company's just downsizing. So make sure that your resume, right, is up to date. Make sure you have everything that you need in place to start to network and you know, reach out to apply to new jobs and what have you. I find that the most difficult thing to do these days, especially if you've been at a company for more than 2-3 years, is to go back, update your resume, update your LinkedIn profile, take that nice picture, right, that looks like the 5-year ago you. I mean, I find that there's so many things that you need to be taken care of that people forget. And so trying to establish a good transition out of one company into another can become very challenging. So try to create that checklist so that you have a safety net at any time, right? This shouldn't just be because you're getting laid off. This should be because you know your worth and you know that a company is going to hire you or is actively looking to hire you today. So being concerned about a transition hopefully is the last thing you're doing. But if you are, know that you're doing it because you're not ready. So, you know, we talk about that all the time, creating a safety net and leveraging your network to build a bridge to your next position.
And just to piggyback on that, have any of you seen any resumes coming in that notate that they were laid off or they were let go, or during an interview they talk about I was laid off due to COVID-19? Have you seen any of that?
Yeah, I certainly have. And if your end date is, you know, in the past or a few months back or something like that, then that's usually a good indicator of that. And I agree with everything that Mauro said. Two things that I will kind of add is, number one, stay positive, because I think as you apply and you start getting responses back, and maybe they're not moving forward, or they are, hopefully, right? But one thing, you have to be positive, because what I've been on the other side of the table interviewing, and it's somebody who, you know, potentially they were laid off. They really haven't like reconciled that, and it carries over into the interview, and that might reflect poorly in the interview itself. So that's why I really stress, you know, to remain positive, have belief in yourself and your skill sets. And one thing that I would recommend to the person that asked the question, and I'm so sorry to hear that, is look out on LinkedIn or Reddit or any kind of website like this. But a lot of people or companies are, you know, putting forth like a database of, hey, these folks were affected, or, you know, these sales folks were affected, and here's a list of them, or consultants, or, you know, engineers, etc. So getting yourself on some of those lists might be where, I know for sure that's the first place that recruiters are looking for talent that has been misplaced, either due to, you know, business economics, or, you know, just COVID in general. But I would say you know, really try to maintain positivity and just, you know, belief that you're going to find another job, because that might carry over into other things like health. It might stress you out, and it might affect your interview performance as well. I've had somebody in an interview that just basically bashed their employer. They were laid off due to, you know, I think it was something to do with sales or something like this. So it was not their fault. And I even said multiple times, it's not your fault. Like, it's a business reason. These things happen, you know, unfortunately. But they were just, you know, going really in on the employer. And, you know, the hiring manager was just like, honestly, I on paper, they're really great, but I don't think that they're ready to start a new position potentially. And this might disrupt my team, and et cetera. So that's why I really just try to stress that, you know, try to maintain some positivity, because if you get negative or too down that path, it might, you know, it's not going to help you basically.
Great. So let's move on. Let's see. What skills, and I'm not sure if any of, well, maybe Monique, but what skills are needed for remote work right now? So I'm not sure if everyone has an answer to that, but.
So currently we're working from, well, only this week now. We've been working from home twice a week, and then alternating schedules, right? So 2 days in the office, 2 days out. We've been appointment only, and it's very difficult and it kind of like touchy situations. I have a lot of city planner friends too, so they were going through the same thing. To remote in is very controversial sometimes, because it's a lot of confidential documents, stuff like that. So I actually only got remote access last week for the last 5 months. So what I had to do was, I was only really doing emails and saving everything onto my flash drive. And I've had this laptop since grad school, so you can imagine how much memory is left on it. So it was very difficult. They gave me a laptop last week, because a lot of cities too, their budgets aren't big, you know, so some have had to lay off people. But I will say it's very difficult working on your personal stuff and having to work with the community. Like, I've had to make phone calls on, you know, I've had to answer on my laptops, and I'm more productive in the office, of course, because I have 2 large screens and stuff like that. But being a planner and having to look at plans like with dim lighting and, you know, not a lot of space is really difficult. But I mean, we're making it work, and I think the majority of the public understands how difficult it is right now. And usually if they're upset, like things are taking longer than usual, they kind of understand, like, hey, you know, half the staff is in the office when I'm in the office, and it's, you know, it's hard to make sure that everybody's schedule is kind of cohesive. But it's been difficult, but it's not impossible.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The question was, what skills are needed for remote work, right?
Uh-huh.
I didn't even answer that.
No, you're good. I was just like, what was the, yeah. No, it's good. Hey, it's 6:30. It's late. You know, we all had a full day of work. You know, come on, Monique. It's okay.
Okay.
You're using a flash drive apparently to like.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Oh my.
I would just say, honestly, just basic computing skills, you know, just to kind of really break it down. I'm not going to say if it's now or before, but there's some folks that kind of struggle with that. So, you know, basic computing skills, and we're all at a different level, right? So it's about being patient. I think the part that does take a little bit getting used to is probably the time management. not having that commute. As much as, you know, all of us who live in LA, we're like, oh my God, traffic and this, that, or the other. But once we started to remote work, I was getting a couple friends like, I'm really off, I don't know how to do this and everything. So I would just say have a setup that is specifically for work, you know, lit correctly, kind of to Monique's point, you know, very quiet, private, incorporate breaks, whether they're ergo breaks or, you know, taking a walk outside or getting some sun or something like that, some fresh air. And it'll take a while for you to get the process kind of down. I'd love to hear from Mauro, because Mauro, I know he's got this down for show. So I kind of like just be quiet, and I want to hear from Mauro.
So most of the work that I do like can be done remotely. So for me, it's like I'll jump on my phone for a Teams call. I normally work just out of a laptop when I'm, you know, traveling around my client site. So I'm kind of used to working remotely. I went and bought 2 large 24-inch monitors for my house just because I need them. And so I just, like Freddie said, find a way to create a space that allows you to be effective and efficient. And if you're getting distracted, get rid of the distractions. If your phone's ringing, you know, turn it over, put it on silent, what have you. But you have to find a way to focus. And the most difficult thing is, you are now probably working, let's say you're not commuting, so you're working an extra 30 minutes to 3 hours, depending on where you're driving to. If it's for me, if I drive into LA, it's a 3-hour drive, so it's terrible, right? But I'm giving the company those extra hours of work. I'm probably eating behind my desk, so another, you know, 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and then I probably work, you know, till like 6 or 7. So you have to find a way to be efficient and not get distracted, because that's what's causing people to work excess amount of hours throughout the day. And it's just not effective. It's not good for you, and it's probably not good for the employer either. So find a way to be efficient, effective. I use, you know, most of my work is via Microsoft Teams. I'll get on a call with my client, and then it's either a project status update, review documents, look at deliverables. I'll get on calls with my team. We talk about, you know, next steps, and you just have to find a way to get that flow going. And if you can't get there, you're gonna find yourself working 12, 14-hour days until you find that rhythm and that balance. And for me, I'll take a break at lunch. I'll work out in my garage, and then I come back to it, right? Or like I have to find times to disconnect, because the first 2 weeks, I've been working from home since March. The first 2 weeks, I was working 14-hour days, and I had no idea, like, why am I working so long if I'm still doing the same project, the same job? And I just was not being effective. So luckily, I store my stuff on the cloud. I don't have to carry a USB, but I had to throw that in there, man.
It's been rough, guys.
And
I had to.
And one thing that I'll add too, Mauro, is like, you know, we were all students at one point. We were all in the library. We all fell asleep in the library at some point, I think, or fell asleep somewhere, right? But, you know, same thing goes for studying. Same thing goes for being a professional. I mean, if you're working 14-hour days, you can't do that 5 days a week, 365. That's just not possible. So figuring out like what your cadence, how, like if you really have to do 14 hours, like, of course, you know, we've all been there. But figuring out like, am I working 8 hours, 10 hours, but doing like an hour lunch and then, you know, 30 minutes here, 30 minutes, you know, so figuring that out, because after a certain amount of time, you know, you get devaluing returns. So you don't want to work 15 hours a day, but, you know, get 6 hours worth of work. That doesn't make sense. You know, you have your personal time, your friends, you know, whatever it is that you need to do. So, you know, I think it's good to take care of work. And to something that Mauro said, and that I would agree with, the right thing, especially from a Latino perspective, tends to be, you know, work, like work, great. But you need to take care of yourself, of your loved ones, your family, and your relationships, whatever they may be. So working is great, but, you know, make sure that you balance it out. And at the same time, you're not working too many hours consecutively, because you're going to be, you know, diminutive returns, and that's not good for you. That's not good for your work either. So.
Great, thank you so much. And then there are 2 quick questions. So is being considered an essential worker during the pandemic and working through it something that will help in getting a job?
I think so. I think I have a lot of respect for everybody that's working, that's out there, right? I have a lot of respect for the people that are working at the grocery store, people that are delivering takeout food, because sometimes my wife works for the state and right now she's at home. We have an 8-year-old who's homeschooled right now. I mean, on this side of the fence, right, if we call it that, it's stressful, it's a lot of work, but luckily we get to work from home. So if and I'm involved in a lot of interviewing and recruiting. So if you told me a good story about why you had to work through these times, I would have immense amounts of respect for you. And I think it's just a matter of how you present it. Like Freddie said, don't bash the employer for putting you in a situation like that, but make a good story and a good outcome out of the situation. I feel like stories like that touch people's hearts, I feel like those stories go a long way. So I personally don't think that having worked through a critical time like this would hurt anyone, unless you use that as a negative story. Then I think it could just look poorly on you, depending on how you express yourself about it.
Yeah, same.
Thank you. So workplace environment is very important. And how can an individual approach an employer to ask about their workplace environment and their management style? And I'm going to assume this is probably at a networking event, or maybe it is during an interview.
Yeah, I don't think this is a like crazy question. I think it's you do want to know about those things because at the end of the day, they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them too, right? And I think we've all had an interview where we were like, oh man, I need to get out of here, or this is not really for me. So asking those questions, and I put some examples in the chat, but asking questions like that, like, can you tell me about your workplace culture? What about your team culture? How do you guys interact? Who do you collaborate with? Is it open air seating? Or, asking these questions those are good questions for potentially like after the interview. I know that was a question prior, but yeah, they're not something that's taboo or anything. And like I said, I put some examples, but those are certainly things that you should be asking 100%.
Great. So another really good question is, what characteristics, skills, and experiences make a quote unquote new graduate stand out? I know some of you mentioned a few things, but are there some other areas which will help a new graduate to stand out when they interview?
I'll kind of just kick it off, because I'm thinking back to the last time that I was on campus, which was less than a year ago. I was there for a recruiting event for Oracle. I met a student, and we've actually talked a couple different times. He came back to me for some advice and conversation, but just describing the way that he came and the way that I remember, why I remember him was extremely professional, knew exactly like the kind of role and career that he was interested in. He also knew a lot about what was going on in industry. A simple type in the company and then hit news is a very simple way to get that check that box. And then, I know this is sound kind of weird, but being able to carry a conversation in a professional networking setting with somebody that you just met, potentially the potential employer, goes a long way because that kind of checks off a lot of boxes like communication, being able to hold a conversation, executive presence, depending on who's around or, what have you. But I would say those are some things that go a long way, as well as just research and just, knowing about your company or knowing about a product release or feature release, knowing what's going on in the industry. Like, wow, Oracle has gone into cloud computing and they've launched and they've grown and whatever it is, right? But being able to speak to that and carrying along a conversation, and then I'm more interested, I want to get to know them, and hey, let me give me your email, your resume, I'd love to follow up with you and that kind of thing. But from my perspective, I think that's what kind of like piques my interest when I'm meeting students, new grad or otherwise.
Great. So Someone sent me a quick question. Would you look at an applicant negatively if that person tended to stay long in their previous job? So the example added here is 10 years or more. Would you look negatively at that applicant?
I think it depends on what we're looking for, but if there's growth, I think it would kind of give us pause if there was no growth within that 10-year period. But if they show that they were working on larger projects and, you know, their, not status level, but their level of employment was moving up the chain, basically, I think that would help out a lot. And I mean, even entry level positions, it's nice to have that experience already. So you don't have to already reteach something that, you know, you'd have to teach to somebody that's just starting off.
Good.
I think if I could add to that, what I've noticed lately is like there's this like talent acquisition war happening with like people that possess very specific skill sets or you know talents in a specific area. So like Freddie talked about, you know, going to the cloud, right? Like data science, data engineering, artificial intelligence, journey to the cloud, like that's the future, right? But I've seen people that have been in this industry for a very, very long time. And so they've been in the industry because they've been trying to build something or establish something, or they just have so much wealth of knowledge. So I've seen where 10 years of experience is it's like, it's almost because the employer kept giving you everything they could just to keep you there because you had so much, you know, so much talent. So I think if you're gonna stay at a company for 10 years, you should become one of those folks that the company can't let go. And if you've been at a company for 10 years, but you haven't really progressed, to Monique's point, then it's probably going to reflect, you know, negatively on you. And if you were trying to look for an opportunity with the company that's looking that has like an upper out track kind of model, you're probably not going to be the best fit, right? So I think if you aspire to find a career where you want to be there for more than 5, you know, to 10 years, then you just have to know what that means for the rest of your career, because then you're just going to have to position yourself, you know, for those companies a little bit differently than if you were devoting anywhere from 2.5 to 5 years. But I mean, COVID-19 happened. People probably got fired or got let go, laid off, right, because of the pandemic. So I think it all depends on the circumstances and what you've been able to accomplish at the company that you were at. But if you're gonna stay at a company for 10 years, you probably want to stay there a little bit longer if you've been able to progress in your career and that, you know, kind of leadership ladder all the way to the top. Because once you get to like the executive level, companies like to develop people and they'll place you in different parts of the organization just to allow you to develop new skills and be relevant. So, you know, think about it. If you're close to that 10-year mark, you know, think about do you want to start over? And if you do, make sure you have a really compelling story to be able to make that jump.
Great. So with the last few minutes that we have, so there was another really unique question. And I lost it. Give me a second here. I just saw it. Where'd it go? Okay. So think of your company's values. And what characteristics do you look for in employees in order to represent those values?
I can share some if you guys, or go ahead, Freddie.
Go for it, Mauro, please.
I think at the company that I work for today is we're big on inclusion and diversity, and so respect for the individual, right? Always one team kind of thing, right? And I know some of these core values, you know, a lot of the times companies just post their core values on their website, and maybe they do, maybe they don't abide by them. But I feel like it's people like me that embody some of those core values that would say, those values speak to me, and that's why I'm still at this company. And I think at the moment where they don't, I think that's where I know that I probably need to go somewhere else. I also look for people that are, you don't have to look like me and you don't have to be a minority, but you do have to want to help others, and you do have to, you know, show a sense of like community, you know, show that you have passion, because those are the things that our clients are actually looking for as well, right? When we come in to help a client through a major transformation, organizations, their organization may change, and it may change drastically. And so if there's going to be a workforce reduction because of the work that you're implementing, how are you going to help some of the folks, right, that are going to be impacted by implementing a new technology? So to have that sense of community, to be connected, right? I think it's really important, and Accenture really focuses on its people. We're in business because we think that we bring the best people to our clients. So those are the core values that I embody. That, you know, I think a student, if he or she were looking for an opportunity at Accenture, if you can demonstrate your ability to connect with people, you know, help people out, build community and respect for the individual, I think that those things just, you know, in general are going to align hopefully with a lot of companies' core values. I look for those things when I interview people. If you can show that you're, you know, it's not just about you, it's about your team. And the more you talk about we instead of I, the more you know, the more attention you're going to get from me. Freddie, you were going to say something. Sorry.
No, you covered a lot of what I was going to say, so I'll just say something different, which is, I think in I guess my current line of work, which is like actually diversity and inclusion, I'm right now more focused on innovation, and are you like data centric? Because you can speak about all these things, right? Like inclusion, equity, diversity, et cetera, et cetera. And there are a lot of people that just speak in those kind of terms, but what's the substance? What's the action? You know, what's the improvement? What's the measurement, et cetera? And as you know, as we've all kind of seen, diversity and inclusion has always been around. It's always been something or other in different flavors and iterations. But for me, you know, are you going to do something different, or are you going to do the same thing? The same thing hasn't worked. You know, we're in 2020, and you know, I don't have to finish that statement, but it's, you know, doing the same thing over and over is not going to work. But then at the same time, you're going to do something innovative, great. But are we going to be able to measure it? If it's going to be innovative, fantastic. But what benefit is it going to bring to the client, to the business, and then ultimately to the customer, right? So I would just say customer centric, innovative, and then also leveraging data, but then also taking the other side of that coin, which is the qualitative side, which is, you know, interviewing Monique after the training, or Mauro, or checking in with them 3 months from now, like, hey, how did that leadership training go? Oh, well, you know, I've been able to implement it, et cetera. That's what is going to take us from, you know, previous diversity and inclusion to the future, and actually making a difference, and you know, being more inclusive, more equitable, and more diverse, whatever public or private company, really. So, you know, I would just say that, but I echo everything Mauro said for sure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that answer. So any certifications that you would recommend that could be useful? And the question is particularly for mechanical engineers, but it could be in multiple industries. So if you don't mind answering that question, any help that you could give to students as far as certifications or something that could help develop them as they're moving forward and beginning to submit resumes for positions?
I'm gonna steal the thunder here because I have to. Just because I'm like, I want to increase our numbers at Accenture, and so Cal Poly Pomona is one of my schools. So shameless plug, guys. I'm sorry, I'm taking over. I think that the things, and this isn't just for Accenture, but the things that I feel like Freddie mentioned, right? There's so much technology out there that is all companies are changing. If you're data focused and you're data centric, and you can, you know, we call it data driven consulting. But I think if you can understand how to, you know, crunch big numbers and make sense of them, develop dashboards such as Tableau, Power BI, which is a Microsoft tool. if you can understand data and you know how to apply some, standard rudimentary machine learning methods to do data crunching, train an algorithm to detect a pattern and predict the future. Those types of things I feel like are in demand all over. Everything is data. Facebook is mining data off your phone right now. You don't even know it, and they're giving it to the government. You have no idea, right? So it's the ability to be relevant in a space where every company's headed. And I think that the certificates that would impress me would be like agile certifications. Go get a Scrum Master certification, and if you don't know what that is, go learn about agile. Go to the Scrum Alliance website, learn about data science, data engineering, machine learning, AI, deep learning, BigQuery, learn about Google Cloud, learn about Microsoft Azure, AWS, understand architecture, because the future of the workforce is going to be there. It's how do we build tools to make Monique and Freddie and Maudo's job a lot more efficient and effective. And I think it's all based on how you're able to interpret data and build tools out of it. And so today you could go stand up your own virtual machine on Google, on GCP, and put your own resume out there on a website that you have for free on a Google Cloud platform, hosting page and stuff like that. So I think everything that's focused on journey to the cloud, digital enablement, all of those types of certifications are in high demand today. And there aren't enough data scientists, and you don't have to be a computer science major to become a data scientist. You can learn how, programming, and you can understand how to use a lot of the, out of the box tools that AWS or GCP has to be able to do machine learning and AI. So for the mechanical engineer that asked the question, don't be discouraged that because you're not a programmer, you can't be in this space. I feel like everybody's going to be forced to understand data and do some sort of, data science type role in the future to go along with whatever role you're doing as a mechanical or electrical engineer, what have you. And that's what Accenture's looking for.
I would just say two things. There's so many courses nowadays or websites rather, that are able to teach you and certify you, right? So Coursera would be one. Obviously, I think some are free. You have to pay for certain others. Google has a ton. LinkedIn Learning has a ton. If I had to guess, I would assume that Cal Poly has some of these resources or its equivalent, right? And then I would just say my thing every time I hear a mechanical engineer is, what's your emphasis, and then what do you want to do with that emphasis? Because, hey, I'm a thermal heat transfer fluids, kind of coursework, but what do you want to do with that, right? So another thing too that I would just say is, as you're looking at job descriptions for these various companies, have a notepad with you or something, but they're going to tell you like what certifications they're looking for, whether it's a PE, an EIT, an SPHR, PHR. I'm sure from Monique, from a urban planning perspective, there's certain certifications, right, that you would look out for. So I think it's, honestly, and I say this a lot, but Google's your best friend. Google any question that you might have, there's going to be an article written about it, YouTube video, something or other that you can leverage. I certainly did that. If I can do that with my BlackBerry that had a keyboard on it, waiting in line at the career fair, I mean, that you guys certainly should be able to do something along the same lines. But yeah, that's certainly something that could get you noticed and get you an interview, and then the job eventually. But certifications are very important, especially in this very, very competitive landscape right now.
Great. I really appreciate those answers. I've written as many of them down, so thank you. Thank you for adding those. That just helps us when we're checking out resumes and helping students on their path. So maybe one final question. If you can think about a topic that we may not have discussed, or a really good piece of advice that you've given so much great advice already, and I really appreciate that. But if there's one thing that you may want to add that we may not have asked in regards to students becoming successful and getting out there in the world of work and searching for positions, what might that be?
Nick, you go first.
Okay, I'll go. So like I said already, I finally knew what I wanted to do. I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do when I graduated from high school, like most people. I kind of started later in life. So I put my behind in gear and kind of said, like, look, I need to do these number of things. So my dad basically taught me to never say no when you're like starting off, right? So you need to show that you want to evolve as a professional. If your boss doesn't necessarily give you tasks to do, you say, hey, I want to learn about this, what do I need to do? Or hey, can I shadow you and do this? They're usually going to say yes. And if they don't say yes, then you should ask somebody else that's willing to like kind of supervise you and help you out there. But I will say, like, never stop asking questions and just continue to learn. And I feel like I may not have as much experience as, I mean, most people, but we've talked about that doesn't really matter. It's what you do with the number of years that you're working and how exactly you're learning. And that's my last tip of advice.
Great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Freddie, come on. I know you got words of
Go
wisdom.
go for it, Mauro. I mean, go, man. Or I can go, whatever you want, man.
Go for it, Freddie.
Ah, damn. I actually didn't have anything. I would just say, I don't know. I mean, something that helped me quite a bit is just, I would say literally, you know, seeking out others that are more experienced than yourself and learning, listening, heeding their advice. I used to think of it as a mentor, but I, you know, looking at it now, I look at it more as a coach. You know, like in football, there's quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing goes for any sport. So there's certain people that might be good with technology, others with strategy, others with client management, others with, you know, you take your pick, right? Data management, data science, like Mauro alluded to. But really, really like take advantage of the people around you, especially if you're joining the workforce as a new grad, or you were at a company for 10 years. There's a company culture that you're not aware of. There is, to what Monique alluded to, there's politics, right? Mm-hmm. So being open and taking feedback from others and seeking others that are, I don't want to say better than you, but maybe more experienced or been enrolled for a lot longer, you're going to be able to close that gap a lot quicker. And then you're learning, you're listening. But I would really say that allowed me to, you know, I worked at Edison, which is a public utility company, for a couple of years. And then right after that, I worked at Google, which I was like, there's no way this is going to happen. And it was just because I would be like asking constantly questions to everybody and learning from everybody, when to them, it just seemed like a conversation or a question. But I was like, no, like, let me kind of do this. So that's something that I would say goes a long way, and it pays a lot of dividends, 100%.
I'll add one last thing. There's a reason why I wanted Freddie to go first before me. When I used to work at Edison, and Freddie and I knew each other kind of outside the office, but we didn't work in the same group. Obviously, he was HR, I was in engineering. But I remember sitting next to Freddie in a couple of meetings, specifically in like the employee resource group, you know, IND space. And what was really interesting to me was the way Freddie carried himself and his professionalism, and like his, just like, he had confidence. So like him telling me that he was shy in high school, I would have tossed that out the window right away. So where I'm going with this story is, you have to identify those people right now that have something that you don't have, and learn from that. And so when I saw Freddie making moves, I was like, I'm also making moves. Like, there's no way I'm going to get, you know, like I loved my time. I enjoy my time at SoCal Edison. But I felt like I needed to continue to grow and challenge myself. And so after 6.5 years, I decided to make that transition, right? So I've always admired Freddie, his career, his passion, his drive. And when I look at Freddie, I always knew, I was like, Freddie's got something I don't have. I need to go develop that. And maybe I didn't ask Freddie back then, but my advice to everyone on this call, find the thing that you're not really good at, that someone else is really good at, and go ask them to help you develop that skill. I find that so helpful, right? As you're prepping for interviews, one of the things that I've noticed is people get shy and they get really stiff, and they just don't know how to react. And I interviewed this student that was he's a computer science major, but his parents made him take acting classes. And so he's got like all this charisma, and he leans into the call, and like he captivates you. And I was like, I need you to go teach these other 5 students how to do that, because that's going to take them a long way. And so I think that's the connection here. Is I always saw something in Freddie that I wanted to develop when I was at Edison. And that's my advice to you, is find that something in other peers of yours, help them, have them help you develop that skill set so that you're more well-rounded, you're comfortable. And as you start to learn new things, you're going to develop just a different level of confidence that's going to allow you to progress, specifically in interviews where everything's virtual, right? To capture someone's attention is really tough. So that was kind of my shameless plug here for my boy, Freddie.
That's nice, man. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thanks, Mona. I'll Venmo you after this.
I'm an expensive consultant, so. Kidding.
That's funny.
So I don't know if any of the students have any last questions in the chat. If you want to type maybe 1 or 2, and we can perhaps ask those questions. Again, I don't want to keep everyone too long, but I really appreciate the panel being honest and giving students such great advice. So I don't see anything coming through. Well, I do, again, a heartfelt thank you for all 3 of you, Monique, Freddie, and Mauro. I know I've known Freddie quite a number of years, so it was so great to have you come in on the panel, and met Monique and Mauro pretty recently. So again, I appreciate you taking all of the time to help our students. And students and alum, if you need any assistance, just know the Career Center is available to help you right at the current time. If you need alumni services, you can just sign up online through the Career Center homepage. If you're a current student, log into Handshake and utilize the online services. Again, we have our free online tool, Big Interview, that will help you to practice your interviewing skills. And you just log in with your Cal Poly Bronco login information. And we hope to see you virtually online at the Career Center at all of our fall events. And I think perhaps both the organizations will be at our event, so look them up through Handshake. And currently today we have over 1,000 jobs that are listed on our Handshake account, full-time, part-time, and internships. So if you are looking, please utilize our online platform. Employers post through Handshake because they want to hire you, Cal Poly Pomona students and alum. So once again, I want to thank Andrea and Melissa and Alumni Services for providing this opportunity to have our alumni panel as great guests this evening. And thank you for helping me to promote the event. And thank you, students and alum, for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone be well.
Good luck, everybody.
Take care.
Good luck.
Thank you.